Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Small Teams, Big Wins. I am joined today by my talented engineer always, Ben Blanke. And Ben, today we have the pleasure of being joined by Noah Austin, founder and CEO of OK Capsule. What's up, Noah? Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jordan. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and we were talking just kind of as we were getting warmed up about essentially kind of like the last one-liner we left was, we want to build cool shit and help people, right? So like, we can't wait to dive into that and kind of explore a bunch of that. Dude, I got to be honest. So I was prepping for this, and this is going to come later in the conversation, but me and Ben were like geeking out about it before. And I was aware of like the cybernetics movement and Bateson and all that stuff, right? But I hadn't really touched back on it. And you had brought it up last combo. And I was like, okay, let's get back in touch with that. And it has been so much fun now since we've been so dialed in on the building of intelligent systems and the idea of guardrails and, taking potential energy of a river and giving it. So all that kind of stuff that we're going to get into, but we had a ton of fun researching and kind of getting dusting off our cybernetics research and the holistic approach and all that. So I want you to know that going into it.
That's fabulous. Yeah, it's a deep rabbit hole.
Both Jordan and I have I was a philosophy student in undergrad, and Jordan is just like big philosophy guy, loves reading about Buddhism, loves reading and so both of us had this like deeper part of our brain wake up when we're doing the research on, control theory, cybernetics, holistic approach, what can we know about this? So it's, I just want to reiterate how fun it was. And this is just why we love having these conversations with people like Noah, because you just like wake up parts of our brain that are sleeping, right? That are just like, this hasn't worked in a few years, and it's like all of a sudden one sentence and we're like, yes.
Yeah, I get the feeling Noah does that like throughout the week, like regularly. Just like people in his they just but no, it's good stuff for real, Noah. Dude, how's your week going over at OK Capsule? What's kind of a little bit of a sliver of your week as the founder that's pushing this supplements company, man, that's just doing some unreal things.
This week has actually been a big one. We went live with our MCP that connects to our cGMP infrastructure. So we can talk a little bit more about that later in the show.
Amazing.
But it's been exciting watching kind of this new technology take over in a way, and it's a foundational technology that allows us to build capabilities and capabilities that then go on and help people. And so it's a really exciting moment, because this is the moment I saw probably in like the early 2000s back in the day, when all this new technology was out, and it's like, wow, you can type, then please come work for us, because we're all figuring this technology out together. And so I think that's where we find ourselves in this space of like, we're all figuring out, how do we deploy this new intelligence? How do we work with this new technology? How do we change the way we work and think and be curious? Mm-hmm. And it leads to such great questions, just like you all. The rabbit holes, they're endless now. It's fantastic.
It's so nice. Yeah. And so just for people that haven't heard of what you're doing at OK Capsule, do you mind just kind of giving that kind of intro one-liner for who you guys are and kind of what you're standing for and what you're trying to do?
Yeah. I mean, the problem that we really tried to solve was making complex supplement stacks easy. And you can see it in any supplement aisle of any supermarket, somebody standing there wondering, which of the 10 vitamin Bs should I take? Which of the 16 multivitamins should I take? And so the what should I take and the how should I take it were two problems that we really wanted to get in, that we wanted to solve. We began with understanding that the what should I take was going to live at a level that we couldn't compete at. This is the AI level that I'm excited to talk more about. So we decided to build the infrastructure that makes it really easy to take complex supplement stacks. You've got your morning, your midday, your evening protocols. We make it really, really easy to take those by putting them in pouches. And so you have your pouch for morning, pouch for midday, pouch for evening. If you imagine the analog of that is I've got 12 different bottles. I'm going to take 3 of these and 2 of those in the morning. And then I'm going to take 4 of those and 1 of those in the midday. Did I take 2 of those in the morning? I don't remember if I took 2. So I'm going to take 2 more, maybe just because I got to make sure I take the thing. It doesn't lead to really consistent results. And so we built the system to make that part really easy.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you guys have a bunch of brands underneath your your umbrella, and are obviously been scaling that impact since you started it in 2019. But I kind of want to go even maybe a little bit before that, because one thing that I've learned from talking with founders, people in the entrepreneurial space, people that didn't really have that bone in their body to want to work for someone else long term, is that it's not necessarily a predictable path, right? And so a lot of times you have experiences that, because of your spirit for entrepreneurship, because of your spirit for the open road, for lack of a better metaphor, that you're not afraid to like go from one experience like this to another experience and use what you learned over here to go into that. So have you always had this drive technically? And 2, has it always been pointed in this direction for holistic health and kind of bridging the gap between exactly like the pain point that you just said, right? But also fusing technology to kind of help, to kind of help keep that moving and actually beneficial for people.
Yeah, it's always been a thing. And like I've always been accused of being a rule breaker, of being the little brat that's going to find the thing, like the question to ask that nobody wants to answer. And I found myself doing that as a kid. And I'm old enough to remember the day when I had to pay $2.50 a minute to log into databases, download data, and I would still do it even though I had no money. Because I was so curious, and I saw these databases as being kind of these vast repositories of knowledge I didn't have. And so that curiosity led to, what problem can I solve and how can I solve it? My early career was in visual effects, and that was a great place to do that. The first film I worked on was the original Beetlejuice. So I did a whole bunch of stuff back then, because then there was no AI. There was like visual effects was all physical mostly, except for like the motion control stuff they did for Star Wars and some of those kind of really innovative effects that were in play at the time. But Beetlejuice
like mini demo worlds, the tight screens coming in.
Yes. Yeah. And so like just the ability to create an image on a screen that had zero resemblance to what I was actually seeing on a soundstage, and it was amazing, just led to this early career in visual effects, where I just solved hard problems. The last film I worked on, which is essentially the last film that I worked on before visual effects went completely digital, was Batman and Robin. I designed ice effects for Batman and Robin, for Mr. Freeze. And it was really fun because I got to work with the head chemists at a chemical company, got to work with liquid nitrogen, all the physical properties of all of these things.
And so for Arnold.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I got to work with Arnold, but I worked on a project that he was the main character in, yes. But I had very little, if anything, to do with Mr. Schwarzenegger.
But dude, all of that like ice and all of the motion, everything around that was so epic for that time. That is like, Mr. Freeze is one of those characters like where you're right, like it was right before the main like tech CGI can do stuff kind of thing. And you're right, and then you're there right in the middle of it. And I don't know about you, Ben, but I think about Mr. Freeze as like
that movie
was pretty epic. Yeah.
That movie was foundational for me. That was like, we had that on VCR. I watched that movie so many times.
Wow, that's fun. And so the little bit of the backstory was kind of fun there. because the ice effects people were trying to sculpt ice or model ice. And if you've ever tried to sculpt ice, you can't sculpt ice. And you figure that out very fast. And so they had three teams. There were sculptors, model makers, and me. And my theory was I want to simulate natural phenomena as closely to nature as possible. And this sort of brings back to why Bateson had such an influence on me. And so the properties I designed was a water clear polyurethane that would flash freeze in a very defined, literally set of seconds. So I timed it so that 20 seconds, it would freeze, flash freeze in a 5-gallon bucket. I'd mix it in the 5-gallon bucket, and at 19 seconds, I kicked the bucket as hard as I could across the room, and it would just freeze in all these organic, amazing shapes and then fall to the ground. And that's what got these amazing organic shapes. I wasn't going to try to build that. And so I just let nature handle it. It's way better when nature handles things.
Do you think because you have this background in visual effects that you're hyper aware of the user experience for sure, right? Like working in that field, and I'm curious if that's translated over into OK Capsule as far as trying to just seamlessly take what are like a lot of like unit economics, right? And even with the timing and just like the purchasing of all of that. I'm just curious if like your time in visual effects has, like I said, kind of like bled over into OK Capsule and just the user experience that people have, through the different brands and the different, logos and stuff that you have participating.
I think the visual effects kind of made me view the word impossible as a challenge. And if somebody says it can't be done, it can be done. It's just we haven't figured out how. And so it did lead to that idea that absolutely everything we can do, we don't have the mechanics for. We might not even have the technology. We might not even have the ability to comprehend the solution, but it's out there. People laugh at me when I say that someday we'll figure out how to divide by zero. And some weird things are going to start to happen in terms of reality and math. But it's just we don't have the mechanics for certain things. So that's the way I view every problem. And so the problem for OK Capsule was the same. How do we solve this problem for practitioners? How do we solve this for other brands that are trying to help people pay attention to their health at a level of detail that's been incomprehensible when only humans are in charge? So it did lead to a mode of thinking where impossible is absolutely possible.
Yeah, no, and nothing, I'm sure, trues that word up for you like your 3-month time in 2019 where you're initially, you're renting out of the back of a supplement shop, right, to get this going in New Jersey, right, circa 2019. And if my timeline's correct, you take your caboose all the way across the country and you try and go out to California. And you slowly realize there that is going to be impossible. So before we get settled over in Nevada, you have this starting point where you're just making it happen in New Jersey. And then you're going over to California. So I'm just wondering if you can kind of like put our audience in your shorts and your shoes during that time. And gosh, man, how was that? I mean, how was that process? I mean, right in the middle of the pandemic too, it's like, you're trying, like, it's a different story if you're purely software and, and you're trying to scale and ramp up software and like, okay, like, we're going to be working remotely. We're going to be, we got our subscriptions going. We got our engineers rocking. Okay, like we can do this. You're building a factory, and you're combining it with intelligent software, intelligent systems, and trying to move that over. So can you just kind of take us back to that time and just what was going on? That's just crazy.
Well, it's hard to remember, but in 2019, the world was kind of still normal in a way. Like businesses operated, we had no indication that anything was going to kind of go off the rails. And so when my co-founder and I started the company, we needed a factory to locate our machinery in. Well, building a factory is kind of expensive, if anybody's ever looked into it. And so for a little cash-strapped startup, it's really tough. So we had one of the initial investors in OK Capsule also operated a supplement company and was kind enough to rent us some space in their GMP-controlled area. So we had a tiny little space in the corner of a packaging room that was smaller than my office, my little office in my house is now. And we had two great employees who didn't really know supplements at all. They were just curious and dedicated and wanted to dive in. And so we started building out the production space in the back of their packaging room. And as we did that, we were leading up until, what was it, March 2020. So we built it up during 2019, got to 2020, and end of February 2020, I was in the factory in New Jersey saying, like, this is great. We had all the machinery placed. It was all assembled. We were going to wire up all the networking and get everything going. And I was going to be back the next week. Well, lo and behold, at the end of that week, they shut the facility down, put everybody in quarantine, split shifts so that people couldn't work together. So our shift had 2 people. So we couldn't have those 2 people work together. So we had to separate them in case one got sick so that we could keep production going. And for a little startup like us, it was really hard. What was even harder was the production line was incomplete. So we were literally on FaceTime with the staff in New Jersey, connecting machines, configuring software, getting things rolling that none of us had done before, but we were having to figure it out and having to invent a new way of figuring it out in real time. So it was a pretty interesting kind of space to lead up into getting that packaging room up and running. And then we operated that for a while on that split shift. It was not easy. And so we decided we needed to move the factory kind of west, and that's what led to our journey.
Amazing. Ben, what were you doing February 2020?
I actually I was supposed to get married in April of 2020. And so we were stressing about finalizing wedding plans for the first of 4 times. Because we were getting married down in Austin, and about a week before the ceremony was going to take place, they shut everything down. No events larger than 15 people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I was. I was still in Pittsburgh.
Buzzy.
Yeah, so we're all in the same boat. It was bananas back then.
Yeah,
bananas, dude. I was in a camper van at the bottom of the South Island of New Zealand out of cell reception. And I was like, dude, I was cruising New Zealand because I moved over there in 2019. I lived over there for 2 years, November 2019. So I got over there just before, and March 2020 hits. And I remember I was like all the way down at the bottom. Like I saw some penguins, I was like down there, and came back into cell reception, and my phone started blowing up from a text thread that I was on from my friends that were back up north in Auckland. And they were like, over there they got levels, right? It's like levels based, right? So it's like we're going from like level 1 to level 2, and then like level 3 48 hours after that, and then like level 4 like really soon after that. And I was like, what are these levels? I was like, how many levels are there? And they were like, 4 is the max. Like level 4 is like total countrywide lockdown, first time in their history. They ain't gonna let some American Joe Blow out there just on a camper van like unattended, So I had to jimmy it over to the closest major city, which was Queenstown, and I got an Airbnb and rented out a room from a lady named Karen for 3 months, for however long like lockdown went. And it was like, all right, like that's March to June 2020. Like, all right, this is crazy, But I digress.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, they say level 4, and then you realize, oh, but we're at level 12.
Yeah.
You said 4 was the max. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so you guys are, crossing over the country mid-production. You're juggling and balancing distance, people, space, technology, compliance, regulation, funding. It's like, I want to know because, the podcast is called Small Teams, Big Wins, but we know in order to get those big wins that there's several missteps that happen along the way. There's no one I've talked to that that doesn't have that, right? In fact, it's a prerequisite for success, right? And what were the missteps that happened in that transitional period?
How
much time do we have?
Yeah.
I saw 60 just fly right at no.
Yeah, I think conceptually the biggest thing that we had to deal with, and I think a lot of small teams have to deal with, is you have to put a lot of people in roles that they just don't have the skills for. You have to ask people to do things like, I have no idea how to do this. Like, cool, figure it out by Wednesday. And so that's a very much of a kind of startup mentality. It gets people pretty anxious pretty fast, especially when the asks are consequential and complex. So I think that combination we struggled with a lot. And so there were certain people, a lot fell on me. I'm glad I have Visual Effects did give me a very diverse background in plumbing, electricity, chemistry, mechanics, all of the stuff. And so it's been very nice on the one hand to be able to move amongst those things and help support the team. But really what got us through was the team's willingness to be curious, the team's willingness to dive into things, look at new problems, look at new ways to solve things. And so we very quickly learned to identify who are the people who are curious enough to kind of survive in this dynamic environment. And then AI has just accelerated the heck out of all of this.
Yeah. And when was that shift for you? Like around what time was it like, oh, wow, like AI is not only, conceptually, it's obviously been around for, several years, but it hasn't really hit the point where people can actually, like the, normal users or just us as entrepreneurs can really leverage its benefits. For you, when was that time where it was like, oh, wow, like this is actually kind of changing the game for us. And I already have this background and this, this kind of attraction to the kind of cybernetics movement, systems, all that kind of stuff. For you, when was that kind of time where it was like, oh, wow, this is going to be a game changer for the business?
I mean, as entrepreneurs, you kind of have to believe that from day one. What we're building is going to be a game changer, right? That's kind of what the fuel that keeps us going. And when we built the company, we saw machine learning was happening. We saw AI on the front. It was a toy. It was a research kind of element at the time. But we didn't know where that would shake out. So what we decided is that kind of AWS nailed it with the infrastructure piece. So let's be the infrastructure of the personalized supplement industry. And so we always kind of tried to build ourselves as the AWS of supplements, because, as I said earlier, we didn't know where the whole inference piece was going to go. We were seeing lifestyle quizzes, some machine learning. We were seeing a nascent AI that would tell you to take 3 grams of airplanes, and it wouldn't understand why that is a problem. And it's and so we've watched kind of this technology mature, but the entire time we were looking really at OK Capsule as the infrastructure layer for all of that, wherever it shook out, because we knew that machine generated intent was going to start arriving at the factory door rapidly, and with incredibly high variability. And so how do we accomplish that? Because that's what personalized medicine absolutely requires. Right. Super high variability, because none of us are identical. And if we want to do it for a lot of people, it's going to come pretty quickly. So that's kind of the thinking that went into the infrastructure layer of the company. And so then we find ourselves here where AI has kind of taken the inference layer for us.
Yeah. And, so you're mid-production, moving this company over, obviously needing to have the proper infrastructure for a company that's trying to be the infrastructure of supplements is important. Mm-hmm. And a key metric was, I heard you say this on the pre-session when we were talking, and it's being able to have that like a mock recall where you can trace 99.99% of orders, right? Which, you know, can you kind of explain to us like why that's so important?
Yeah, I mean, so if you go buy a bottle of supplements at the supermarket, nobody knows that you actually bought that. And so if something goes wrong with that product, they can't contact you because they don't know who you are. You know, we have 99.9+% traceability all the way to the end consumer. And that's, again, a result of when we built the facility, one of the key roles, obviously, is the quality oversight. We needed somebody with a lot of experience in the industry, but someone who was willing to think differently about how that could operate, because everything we were doing was completely different. So we've designed quality systems, and that was a big part of that journey, was understanding, as we were getting things ready to move across country, what does this whole thing need to look like? And so our head of quality is curious, smart, experienced, and can look at the problem and help solve the problem, as opposed to dictating how they've solved a similar problem in the past that actually doesn't apply right now. And so having the quality oversight from the beginning allowed us to build that into the systems as we constructed the facility, the physical plant, and as we constructed the software system. And it very much mirrored that kind of Batesonian idea where quality isn't this gate at the end of the process where you do all this work and decide, nope, that one gets thrown away. This happens upstream when you're deciding. And that's, you know, nature doesn't just give you the forest, the river, the mountains, the snow, everything right at the estuary by the ocean. No, it's passes through boundaries. It passes through different parts of the system before it reaches its end. And it's gated at each part. Is there too much here? Is there too little? And so we tried to build our systems to mirror that kind of same idea, where quality is endemic in the system as opposed to a gate at the end.
Which I love that. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say, we are, you know, also as an AI automations company, just in a different scale, we're building these like multi-part systems as well. I'm curious where your focus is as like the leader of OK Capsule, you know, founder. When you're looking at building a new system, do you look at what can this system do and like what is the purpose of it? Or do you look at how does it fit into the whole and what does it add to my business? Right?
Yes. All of the above.
Yeah.
And that's part of it is how do we look at systems through this holistic lens, where, because we do need to pay attention to how it fits into the business, but we do need to pay attention to how it functions and whether or not that's serving the need it was designed to serve. You know, and that's where I feel like kind of the natural systems mirror all of that.
Right. No, and like to your metaphor you made, you know, the river flowing through the mountains, the forest, you know, that silt doesn't get to the ends if it doesn't go through the mountains and the forest and everything until it gets to the bay, right? So you don't have the whole system unless you have each working part together. So yeah, no, it's very challenging to consider it all as one piece when you're in the weeds, kind of like coding on your one agent that does this. You have to think about, okay, it's coming from this and it's going to here. So how do how do you delegate that work to your teams and make sure that each of your engineers or the people working on these systems keep those things in mind when they're developing?
Ooh. Can we talk about engineers now?
We can definitely talk about engineers.
Yeah, my favorite. I've got a chef on my engineering team, and I love it.
Yes. I love it.
And the reasons that he's on there speak to kind of what we're talking about here, in that he's a great chef. So I love it when he comes out here because he cooks me dinners and it's amazing. But he puts the little pinch of spice. He does the little thing that's going to add just that little touch that makes it special. Because he's paying attention to what I like, what whoever's going to eat his food likes. He's very curious about how he can make it better. And this is just how he operates. And so if we take those skills and apply them to just what you said, Ben, on like, how do we think about all this stuff? How do we think about complex systems? A chef is also thinking about what's the end result? And then how do I get there? And then what are the systems I need to put in place to do this at a commercial level? And so it's a kind of similar analogy to what you just laid out, in that we're looking at how do we build a system that's resilient, and how do we not get overwhelmed by the amount of information. And part of that is like some of the abstraction that we can see here. We don't need to pay attention to all the information. We only need to pay attention to the information that actually makes a difference at this stage. The rest is noise. Nature's super good at filtering out the information that's noise and only really paying attention to the thing that matters. How do we ensure that a pathogen doesn't get introduced into the system and then seen as truth and then iterated and then taken to a level that we don't want to go? So when you think about things like boundaries and communications and feedback loops, that starts to become easier. I know there's a lot of talk about like looping systems and all of that, but it can be confusing as soon as you get into all the little tiny details, as opposed to, wait, what does part A and part B do? How do they communicate? And what do they actually have to talk about? They don't have to talk about everything. We're focused here. There's a boundary on the information we're going to talk about here. We're not going to talk about what we're going to have for dinner tonight. Well, maybe we will, but as an example, we're going to talk about the things that are relevant to this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to say, if you're a chef around, our dinners are going to be very different. I guarantee that.
Yeah. No, I can't wait till he comes out here again.
No, it's super interesting. And I want to try and take a moment here, and I want to try and land the plane on this, because we're talking about like a lot of big concepts that so cybernetics, right, comes from Kybernetes, which actually means steersman, governor, taking resources, power, and being able to, right, back to your metaphor of a river without any banks or guardrails floods, right? But as soon as you build up those guardrails and you give it direction, that's when you get power, that's when you get direction, and that's when you get some movement. So cybernetics talks about this holistic way of thinking about a system where you understand that, back to your point on like the resources, right? It's like, okay, we have a cloud, it rains, it might snow, eventually it melts, it comes down, you get the mountain. You're not going to like get all of that at just like one stage. It's part of the whole process, and having awareness of what those two pieces in the process need to communicate, and designing securely, designing with intention for that, leads to a much more complete system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So cybernetics, so we've talked about the system and the efficiency of it and being able to be, and whenever you're looking at, right, this system, a whole kind of core principle of cybernetics is that whenever you're building guardrails or introspection back on the system, it actually has to be a piece of the system, right? It's not supposed to be some, external unattached thing that's like an auditor coming in. We want the system that's already, but the piece of it's got awareness of the whole system to be introspectively looking back. And so then all of a sudden now you have this like layout, this foundation for a meaningful system that's producing power. And now all of a sudden, the builders, the people that are going to be involved in carrying that system, now no longer need to necessarily have the background of a developer, right? Or know how to code. But instead, we want the maintainers of that system, we want the builders to be the ones that are able to think critically, think creatively, and enable that, just like with you seeing the potential, right? With Chef coming onto the technical side and what that can do. So it's just crazy to me, because the whole approach to all of this is changing very rapidly, and it's opening up like a lot of possibilities. And to your point, Noah, like I think we're all trying to, especially for those that are curious, right? We generally like to kind of push where that boundary is, right? And kind of see where that's going. So for you kind of bringing this back, like, what's exciting you about the next 6 months for OK Capsule, And how do you continue to enable maybe historically like non-technical people that are very good at critically thinking and very creative, and like how do you enable them on your team, right, to kind of keep this going? Long-winded answer. I appreciate you guys sticking with me as we landed the plane, but it's a really amazing time. And whenever we're thinking about the big picture perspective and how everything fits in, that's always kind of where my brain goes. And I'm like, okay, we have this like system, and it needs to be aware of the entire system. We need to be, kind of being the watcher on our own system and creating that within the system. And then we need to hire people that we can enable creatively and, enable that creative thinking, right? So I don't know. Yeah. What's exciting you kind of about the next 6 months for you, Noah, and, and all that?
Next 6 months here, I think we're finally at a place where we always wanted to be with OK Capsule, which is we've built this conversational infrastructure. And I say conversational infrastructure, meaning that our physical plant can talk to your AI. We don't receive the information from your AI, but we can talk to it. And I think it's an example of how we can operationalize AI and agentic frameworks in the physical world. I'm excited to see how that happens. And I have both optimism and trepidation, as I think a lot of people do around this space. I see, the possibilities are incredible to me. When you put creativity and curiosity as the primary skills that are required, because the underlying skills can now be augmented or even replaced with an intelligence, what now becomes possible? Is our greatest engineer waiting tables somewhere? I don't know, doing a job that they shouldn't be doing or don't want to be doing because they're a creative engineer. How can we alleviate the tyranny of how for so many people? How do I get this thing done? Now you have something you can ask, something that can actually help you implement. So from our perspective, I'm really excited to see how people will use the MCP technology to connect to our infrastructure with their AIs. And what it's doing for me is it creates an iterative healthcare cycle that was impossible before. I can get my labs. Those labs are read by an intelligence. That intelligence creates a supplement stack that's based on my biomarkers. It can then now place an order for that supplement stack through our infrastructure. Our infrastructure can tell you it's too much iron or whatever else is not manufacturable about it. You can't put 200 pills in one pouch. So it will keep those boundaries, but it won't just say, request denied. It will feed back. You have too many pills in the pouch. You have too much iron. And then the AI can go, oh, I will revise, and it'll revise and then restart that same conversation. And by the time it reaches our system, it's manufacturable. And I can do that as often as I have biomarkers. And so that's something that just wasn't really feasible or practical until right now. You could do it if you were a super biohacker and you did it all yourself and you had the 12 bottles out and you actually did the thing that I said people don't want to do. But now it makes it accessible to all of us. And I'm even more excited because now, even with a pretty low dollar amount, a $20 a month subscription, you can get health inference. You have access to a level of medical knowledge that might have been absolutely inaccessible to you before. And so I think it broadens access to a level of personalized care that was inconceivable even months ago. And so I'm really excited to see how our brand partners are going to start using this, how our clinical partners are going to start using this, how I get to start using this. And so I think that we're in a space right now where we're starting to see AI touch the physical world. And I hope that we can kind of help provide an example that this can be done safely. This can be done well. It can be done with benefit, because we're not just trying to predict every bad response a model might give. We're putting hard guardrails on a physical plant so that it can't manufacture something that shouldn't be manufactured. And we'll tell it why so that it can learn and get better. So I'm very excited to see kind of where that takes us all.
Just to take a step away from engineering terms for any of our less technical audiences, I want to emphasize how cool this is that Noah's talking about here. People are scared of the idea of an AI coming in, making decisions for you, and then you being hurt by a poor decision that's being made. OK Capsule adds guardrails that stops that from happening. OK Capsule's AI that's going to communicate with yours is going to stop you from your AI from placing a wrong order. It's going to stop it from ordering, like Noah said, too much iron, too many pills in one pouch, right? These are real human-centric, real benefits that we're finding in AI that, like, a lot of people are skeptical existed at all. You know, you go online, you see people, AI is taking jobs, AI is taking artists' jobs. It's like, maybe, but there is this use for it here that is really cool and really actually helping people. And so I just wanted to emphasize that because I do think it's really cool what you're doing, Noah.
I agree. And one of the hardest things, bringing it back to the engineering, is to design with guardrails that still allows like usability and efficiency, right? And still delivers on that. Because if there's anyone that's dabbled into the engineering side of it, it's hard to find that balance between overly too restrictive guardrails and then all of a sudden you're having, you know,
an error,
bad user experiences when they're like trying to do something, but it was like too overly restrictive. And then you go on the other side and whatever. So it's a slippery slope and it's very difficult to do. So from the non-technical side, it's badass. From the engineering side, it's also badass. So congratulations, Noah, you're badass.
Amazing.
Yeah. But to bring it back to how this starts being applied in the physical world, that's actually one of the things where I'm really excited to move back to Pittsburgh at. For our audience, the Mayday Naptic headquarters is heading back to Carnegie Mellon University at Project Olympus, Pittsburgh. And, you know, Pittsburgh's amazing because you have some like unicorn companies like Gecko Robotics that are out there. You have a lot of people that are in the space exploration kind of thing. You have this convergence of like blue collar kind of trade, lots of labor, industrial factory, steel industry, healthcare, all that kind of stuff, merged with the kind of academic and the lore of like a University of Pittsburgh, of a Carnegie Mellon University, of all the universities that are there. So what you're seeing is this like, you know, infusion of, you know, latest technology, academia, but combining that with the physical space and industrial kind of more complex systems. So it's a very, that's where I sense a lot of the, I mean, even I go back and forth on it where I'm like, damn, I'm excited. This is amazing. I like, you know, I'm so curious. And then I'm also like, whoa, this is kind of terrifying. Like, you know, how are we going to be able to handle this? Because it really is something like this, like, I imagine this like cool, like gamma ray gun or wherever, which it's like, it's going to magnify whatever direction it's pointed at. And being able to bring awareness on what like secure by design, how you have appropriate guardrails, and also caring about the direction and intention that we point this at is so critical for the next step of this. And so where I want to kind of lend back to, you know, is like, whenever you're kind of thinking about the future and you're obviously a very eternally optimistic person, you know, I can already get that sense from you, but there's no challenge that's not. What sort of things can you provide to our audience, just kind of trying to help realize like the agency that we have in what comes next, right? I think a lot of times people get scared because they don't realize that like we actually have agency. We actually have the ability to influence what comes next. So what would you kind of say to our audience on that?
Fundamentally, it's the age of curiosity. Be curious. You have the tools, the things that you thought were impossible before, many of them are possible now, because a lot of the barriers that people experience was they didn't know how to do something. So let's remove that barrier and see what comes out. You know, and there's a lot of fear mongering going on. Some of it is kind of legit. Some of it is not. I think some of it is hyperbolic. Some of it is financially motivated. Like I have a lot of questions about where some of that emanates. But in the end, every technology can either go awry or it can go be a benefit. And a really simple example, I remember when Photoshop came out and people were saying, well, if you use Photoshop, you're not a photographer. Find me a commercial photographer now who doesn't use Photoshop. Very few. And film is harder and harder to get. And so as we become more comfortable with these technologies and as we integrate and accept them, we start to find the benefits. But the fear mongering kind of overrules that in the beginning. And so try to look past that. Try to look past the fear, the motivations that some people may have to consolidate all the money. And one thing I would say, that just to speak to something you said, Ben, I hear a lot that AI is taking jobs, it's taking jobs, it's taking jobs. I see it as AI is changing jobs. Yeah. And that's not to minimize the fear that people have if your job is one that's changing. But what it does do is it gives that sense of agency, Jordan, that you're talking about. You do have the agency to change with your job. If you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're a knowledge worker of any kind, this is going to fundamentally impact your job and how you do your job. Will it make you smarter at your job, or will the fear overrule that and not let you engage with the technology, not let you engage with this intelligence so you can be even better at what you do? Because human agency is still part of this. It's generative AI. It is not creative AI, right? And we are still the engine of creativity, where the question becomes the more important thing. Answers are easy. So ask lots of questions. Ask questions about your job. Ask questions about what you're afraid of. Ask questions about, how do I navigate this? Because frankly, the AIs are pretty objective of saying, yeah, I'm going to take this part of this job and I'm going to change it up. So here's how you can adapt with me. And I think looking at it through an adaptive lens, as opposed to a lens that's too often rooted in obsolescence and fear, is really important for people. And I think that's where my optimism comes from, because I see so much possibility for so many people, like my good friend and chef who's on my engineering team.
I love that. Yeah. And what kept coming to mind to me while you were talking is like, yes, we have agency, but that doesn't mean that you get agency if you're not willing to be open and curious yourself, right? Whereas like, if your agency doesn't just come from just showing up and going, hey, I want agency. No, like you need to be open, you need to be adaptable, you need to be curious, and you need to be, which is historically very hard for a lot of people, right? So
agency is a book on the shelf. You have to take it off and read it. It's not going to read itself.
I love that. Okay. So that's landing that plane right there. I love that. Guys, this has been a really, really insightful conversation. Noah, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time today. One thing that we do like to do at the end of our segments is, I just kind of want to throw it to each of us for like a minute or two. And Ben, I want to start with you. Like, what are some things that having this conversation with Noah has kind of bubbled up for you to the surface?
Yeah, so we talked about it a little bit at the start of the call as well, but I've got a background in philosophy, and over the last year and a half, I've been very focused on the zeros and ones of computer science, of coding, of working with agents, that my philosophy brain has kind of turned off a little bit. I'm still asking a lot of questions. I'm still very curious, but specifically this kind of oneness with a system has been the big one that I'm thinking of right now, right? I've been designing agents that do a specific task without taking the step back and thinking, how does this fit, right? And so, I was joking with Jordan before the call. I'm a big Bob Marley fan, Noah. And there's a song, very famous, I'm sure everyone knows it. It's, can you be loved and be loved? Can you be loved and be loved, right? And he talks about how it's impossible to be loved unless you accept love in yourself, right? You can kind of extrapolate that to, it's impossible for your agent to work unless the agent's part of the system, right? Your agent is not going to do what you want it to do unless it's integrated in the system, right? This holistic approach. So that's been my big takeaway that I've been thinking about a lot since our pre-session, Noah.
Love it. Love it.
Love that.
I'm gonna go next, Noah, and then we're gonna leave it for you for kind of some final thoughts, where you can find people and what they should know about OK Capsule over the next kind of back half of the year. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Cool. What this left me with is I'm a little unique in the sense that, like, I think I can operate both sides of my brain pretty well. I think I can go technically pretty deep, but then I can also kind of come back and kind of go more of the kind of design centric, big picture kind of thing. And for me, like, I always have this desire to make music, to I wanted to be a travel and landscape photographer for a long time. And so I'm very passionate about that. So creative assets is something I like to produce a lot, but I get hit at this kind of moral boundary, which it's like, okay, because like I'm a good engineer, like I could, if I wanted to create a song, like I could write some AI that would go and like scrape all the best practices for these types of songs and genres I want to do, hit me with a brainstorming session on like a BPM and like the structure and like some note, riffs and different things like that. And I think I could produce with AI like a 6 song and like launch like AI like profile, like whatever. I think that's kind of effed up, right? Like I think that's kind of screwed up to do that. So for me, but then I get reassurance when it's like, no, like people's innately creative drives and desires can still be supplemented by using AI as like an assisted like work product, as a tool, and yeah, I don't know, like I wouldn't say that I have like a direction or like a decision one way or another on where that like moral boundary is of using AI and copying and replicating and using that as restoration. But hasn't humanity done that from the very beginning, right? Haven't we always used other things that were created as sources of inspiration? And now all of a sudden, because I can go extrapolate that information and synthesize it very, very quickly, and I can do that now better than a lot of other people because I understand this technology, does that give me the right or desire to then produce creative assets? I don't know. I still do not know where I land on it. It's a eternally thing for me, but that has what has been evoked for me in the last 10 minutes of our conversation. So it stoked a nice little fire there. Noah, thank you so much for your time today. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. Kind of close this out for us. Where can people find you for OK Capsule? What sort of things do you have coming up? And just any little final pieces of insight that you're willing to share with us.
Well, I think, Jordan, you just gave a great example of how your job is changing. And some of the existential questions you're asking about kind of your job, your role in the things that you create. And I think you're spot on. We stand on the backs of so many other people all the time throughout history. Everything that's been created before us is a foundation for everything that gets created from this point forward. And so there's always a debate on how do we use those things. What are the ethical and moral guidelines and boundaries on how we use those things? Same questions that came up with Photoshop, same questions that are coming up now. They've been multiple times. And so I have no doubt that we will find the answers to that. The phrase tea, Earl Grey, hot might resonate for some people. That is a big phrase for me from Star Trek. And it was when Patrick Stewart, as Captain Picard, would go up to the matter replicator and get his hot tea. I always wanted to learn how to convert electrons to atoms. And I think we're finally at this space, kind of talking about what you alluded to, Ben, in that you're focused on electrons. And I have been focused on building a matter replicator since I was like 9. So OK Capsule is as close as I've gotten to that. And being able to turn all those electrons that we're all writing and figuring out how to deal with into safe atoms that we can actually eat. And so you can find us at okcapsule.com. You can see, learn about our MCP integration, our support for brands, how you can start your own supplement business very, very quickly with us, that sits on top of our cGMP compliant infrastructure that is UL audited. And so the electrons flow into a third-party audited infrastructure to ensure that they are safe. So it's not just me telling you, it's UL telling you that we do the right things. Thank you for the conversation. It's a really important conversation, not just around supplements and what we're doing at OK Capsule, but in terms of a larger sense of how do we operationalize AI in the physical world in a way that isn't scary, in a way that is safe, in a way that we can trust. I think it's possible. I think OK Capsule is an example of that.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, thank you so much, Noah. And guys, if you are interested in learning more about amazing applications where we are seeing tech be applied for human-centric impact, which is what we're all about here. Tune in, follow the podcast, reach out. We'd love to have a conversation with you. Noah, thank you again, brother.
Thanks, Noah. It was
Thank you.
Hang out.
Great talking with you both.
Let's go. Noah, one thing that I wanted to ask you is, so we run this innovation lab and are trying to get this off the ground at CMU. Would you ever be interested in being a participant, mentor, involved in whatever capacity you have time for as part of this innovation? It's centered around, taking research insights that generates hypotheses towards solutions, a problem of the modern day, and kind of mobilizing students to take that research and take an entrepreneurial journey to then try and, go from 0 to 1 in like a 12 to 16 week kind of structured curriculum course where we have me, people like you, right, that are coming in and kind of helping guiding along that process to then get that one. And then hopefully we can use that as a way to go get funding, sponsor the projects, and then kind of go from 1 to 1,000, all the while giving students, the opportunity to like build their own path through this way if they don't want to do the Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, the FANG network, network kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So if that's something you'd be interested in, man, I'd love to just kind of keep you, keep you in the loop on some of that.
I would love to do that. I would love to do that. The helping kind of this next generation figure out what the hell's going on with all of this. I would love to do that. I'm working on a project with a group of people in Mexico to try to help some of the young people there kind of get acquainted with this technology. How can we turn this from generative electrons to generative atoms and make really cool things for the world? I would love to participate in anything that we can do to kind of help all of us learn how to steward this technology into existence and not relying on just a lot of people who have a lot of financial interest in getting us there. But what is this going to do for all of us? Yes, long way of saying yes, I would love to help.
Amazing. Yeah, the mentorship aspect, I've noticed this for me for a long time. Like that's actually what truly like lights me up, is like, I love the building of the company. I like that. But being able to translate that and be a part of that growth process for the next wave is something that really lights me up, and it sounds like for you too. So that's a big piece of like why I'm trying to go back to Carnegie Mellon is to be very, very involved in that. Long-term plays, I want to be an adjunct professor over there and kind of do all that. So
amazing.
Yeah, best way to go is just go get in there and kind of go get it ramped up. So I'll be sure to be keeping you updated.
Please do.
Yeah, it'll take me about a week to edit this episode, and then I'll tag you on LinkedIn when we post it out.
Okay. And we actually did create a supplement store for you. I'll send you that URL, and you can take a look at that. It's what the system will just spin up very quickly. It takes and this is spun up by the chef, who is our engineer. So you can see kind of what that looks like, and let me know if you have any questions.
So thank you so much, Noah. This was really a enlightening and fun conversation for both.
It's super fun.
Yeah.
Great way to, I was kind of like, I was a little bit overwhelmed this week coming into the Thursday. And this is what always happens is like, okay, we got the podcast session and they're just able to like, just kind of shed some of the responsibility for a second and just talk about stuff with other like-minded individuals. It's like super fun. So yeah,
is.
thank you again. Thank you again, Noah. And always appreciate you, Ben.
Amazing. Thank you.
All right, guys.
Have a good one.
Bye.